Moving onward to our next session on the topic from knowledge to action, empowering senior leaders through strategic learning interventions. Introducing our thought leader, Mr. Amit Barua, Director of XCD Executive Development. Mr. Amit Barua is a senior leader with over 23 years of experience in the areas of learning and development, training and facilitation, training management, executive education, team management, and project management. I request Mr. Amit Barua to please be on the dais.
A very good afternoon to all. Indeed a pleasure. Indeed a pleasure interacting with all of you all this afternoon. You all having a patient audience. The topic of my talk this afternoon is from knowledge to action, empowering senior leaders through strategic learning. Now, why this topic? In fact, typically across work that we do with senior leaders across medium and large organizations in India, parts of South Asia, the GCC, and in fact also in the US, we've always seen that for senior leaders, sponsors of programs typically are very keen that the learning is action oriented. These are actionable outcomes and there are measurable outcomes at the end of every learning intervention. I'll talk a little bit about that and I'll draw insights from the work that we do across a number of organizations for senior leaders over the next about 20 minutes. Transformation is old news. The future is industry convergence. I think all of us will agree with this. In fact, today, if, for example, and I'll give an example here, for example, if I'm a bank, then I am, as a banker, more concerned about the competition coming in from the unknown rather than competition coming in from the bank next door, the familiar bank next door. In fact, today there are multiple banks who don't own a single branch at all, and they rate right up there in terms of CSAT scores. Now, do we wonder if we would want to call them as a technology company or a bank? So yes. Transformation is old news. The future is industry convergence. Now, India's generative AI landscape is projected to surpass over 17 billion by 2030. Again, AI, and we saw this with some of the speakers here earlier than me. AI is a great skill leveler. In fact, in the L&D community, at one point we used to have a role of that of a content writer. The role holder used to prepare content for a lot of our programs, particularly for asynchronous programs that used to get developed. Today, in fact, with AI and ChatGPT and the likes, this role is largely becoming redundant. The gap between a good content writer and a not so good content writer is particularly reducing. So, what therefore are the skills which are becoming more and more relevant in today's context? Skills which AI can't pick up, and these are the power skills. For example, then, skills where somebody is able to show strategic direction to a group of senior audience. Skills where somebody is able to motivate a set of leaders, where somebody is able to show compassion, kindness, and so on and so forth. These are the power skills which AI can't replicate and are becoming increasingly more and more important in today's context. With that in mind, what therefore are the skills that CXOs are required? And what we have Josh Bershon here, who believes that CXOs require skills which are broad skills and deep skills. And when he says broad skills, he's largely referring to skills like client consulting, project management, sales recruiting, and so on. And when he's talking about deep skills, he's again referring to skills like pipeline management, channel management, executive selling, and negotiation. Now, having seen this, let us now look at our traditional learning structure or framework. We are very familiar with this, all of us. We start with the learning needs assessment. At our end, we call it the diagnostic study. Then we move on to the design and development of the learning intervention. And then thereafter, the implementation of the delivery of the intervention. And finally, measuring impact from that learning intervention that got done. I'll spend a little bit time on each of these next couple of slides. Now, diagnostic study. Now, typically when we look at a diagnostic study, the aim of a diagnostic study particularly should be always and always to kind of align the learning intervention to the medium-term, short-term, and long-term goals and strategies of the organization. That should be the sole purpose and objective of a diagnostic study. That way, we are actually ensuring that a learning intervention is linked to a larger organizational requirement or a goal and a strategic direction or that the organization wishes to take. It is a means to an end rather than an end in itself. And the better we are able to do that, the better would be the buy-in for typically senior leadership interventions that get run. Now, how do we go about doing this? At our end, we look at multiple formats that we use to receive insights from a diagnostic study. A is information through secondary information and thereafter from primary information. And in secondary information, we typically wish to look at once after, and this is across work that we do, we follow this religiously, is that once an NDA is in place, we seek strategy documents from the organization. These are documents which help us understand what is the medium-term and near-term strategies and goals of the organization is trying to chase. We also look at available competency frameworks for the leadership group for whom the intervention is being envisaged. And having looked at that, we then finally do the following, which is we conduct in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, and structured questionnaires which help us receive more information. When we conduct these in-depth interviews, as a part of these in-depth interviews, we would typically, ideally like to interact and interview members of the HR department, the LND team. We would want to interact with members of the senior most leadership within the organization. Ideally, if possible, we want to interact with the CEO and MD. That's to help us understand where is he that he wishes the organization to be in 3 years down the line, 2 years down the line, 4 or 5 years down the line. Then we also would want to interact with prospective participants in the program, and then finally reportees to those prospective participants to close the loop. Having done that, this culminates into a diagnostic study report that gets formulated, and then therefore that becomes the design, that forms the basis for the design of the program. Now when we look at the design of the program could be a short duration, could be something like a 2-day or a 3-day kind of a format of an intervention. These largely are event-based, specifically to address a particular issue or a particular gap at a given point of time, for example, a strategy workshop. But largely across work, again, that we do, we see that there is a requirement and a need, and we hear that very often for a journey-based or a long-duration intervention, which is a planned developmental exercise. And when we look at a planned development exercise, which is a journey, we could build in any of the following. We could have synchronous classroom sessions that could be built in. We could have in-person classroom sessions that can be built in as a part of that journey. We could have asynchronous virtual learnings that get built in. Typically, when does asynchronous generally get built in? We would typically could look at using asynchronous learning, for example. If you want to draw out a separate learning path for each individual who's part of that intervention. So he attends a separate learning path for himself, each participant or each individual in that intervention, while he also attends a common path along with the rest of the group. So these interventions could be, for example, electives that you may want to assign to him. That is an outcome of an exercise, for example, a Hogan that may have got done, a 360-degree that could have got done, and there are specific inputs that have come out for each individual in that particular group, which you may want to address. And all of this can be then blended into a long duration track. And when we talk about these journeys could be typically anything between a 3-month to a 4-month to a 6 to a 9 to about a 12-month and so on. What keeps coming again and again in these senior leadership learning interventions is something called industry immersions. And we hear that again and again. Typically we see that, yes, senior leaders are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing, they want to get engaged, they want to experience it, and so on and so forth. I'll give an example here. For example, if we are doing a leg of the program for example, say Singapore, and again, for example, you have something like operational excellence, which is one of those areas that needs to be addressed for that particular group which is undergoing the intervention. Then how about taking them to something like a Marina Bay Sands? Now, why a Marina Bay Sands? And I'll share some thoughts here. Now, Marina Bay Sands is one of those premier hotels across the globe which has the highest occupancy ratios. Their occupancy ratio goes up to as high as about 98%, which is very, very high for hospitality industry standards. Yet, with those kinds of high occupancy ratios, the amount of time that their guests spend for check-in at the check-in counters across all their towers is among the lowest. So therefore, you have a situation here where, how do they deal with this? That means that the time between somebody moving out of the room and the next guest going in is very less. So how do you get that time to kind of do up the room, make up the room, and so on? And yet, they also grapple with something which most premier hotels don't. In Marina Bay Sands, the rooms are vertically placed, 64 stories, versus, so that means that if you have a laundry room or a room where the cleaning staff put all their stuff and they go back and all, it's across floors. So when they need to clean up these rooms, they need to go up and down in lifts, which takes time. Versus in most premier hotels, where the rooms are placed horizontally, and you have these cleaning rooms on each floor, at least one between two floors, if not in all rooms. So they, they move horizontally, not wasting time. Now, with that kind of a challenge, with what they achieve is remarkable. It's operational excellence at its best. Now, if you can take these senior leaders to go there and experience this and see for themselves how this gets done, that's kind of learning that they will take back with them and keep with them for a very long time. Now, if you look at this, this is, in one case, there's somebody who is actually virtually conducting a session. In the other one, there is an AI of himself who is conducting the session. So if this is the situation, we are not very far when we will have AI delivering asynchronous, synchronous sessions for us. And again, if you look at this, Replica says that most of its users, a number of its users fell in love with their AI chat box companions. Now, if you can fall in love with your AI chat box companion, you would definitely not mind having an AI personal executive coach. You surely shouldn't be minding having an AI executive coach with you. Having looked at that, if you now look at implementation. Now, in most, again, in the work that gets done, senior leaders typically, they long to have a certificate, which is aspirational certificate that they can showcase, something that they can put up on their LinkedIn profiles and so on and so forth. So if we are able to bring in a certificate from an Ivy League university, that adds again as a cherry on the cake. We are exclusive partners with a number of Ivy Leagues out of the US, Europe, and here at home in Singapore. And here we bring in a number of the Ivy Leagues. From the US, we bring in Cornell University, we bring in Chicago Booth, Carnegie Mellon, UCLA, Michigan Ross, Brown University, to name a few. From Europe, we bring in Oxford University to India. And nearer home from Singapore, we bring in INSEAD, National University of Singapore, and Singapore Management University. If we are able to top this with Ivy League faculty, who again bring in strong research-driven content into the classroom, that's again another cherry on the cake. Senior leaders typically look for networking opportunities. You give them an opportunity where these networking opportunities should go beyond, they look for these opportunities to go beyond the duration of the learning intervention. So if you are able to give them these networking opportunities by forming alumni communities, that helps. And lastly, if you want an international exposure, we could do one leg, for example, in Bangalore, and another leg in Dubai, with an industrial immersion in Dubai, or in London, or Singapore, or even, in fact, at the New York campus of Cornell University. Lastly, I spoke about program impact assessment at the start. These are kind of tools that one can look at deploying, and we look at program impact at all the 4 levels of the Kirkpatrick's model. At level 1, we have happy sheets, all of us know this. At level 2, we have assessments, quizzes that get brought in. At level 3, where we are tracking behavioral change, we could bring in peer coaching, executive coaching. At level 4, we typically bring in action learning project work and Shark Tank projects. Now, the difference between action learning project and Shark Tank projects is that in action learning projects, groups are working on projects to kind of reduce cost or increase revenue within the organization or within the function that they represent. And in Shark Tank projects, the groups are working on projects to kind of seek funds from the sponsors of the program to take the organization to the next orbit of growth. That's all from my side. And when I've all along been mentioning about project sponsors, I have typically, when I say project sponsor, program sponsors, I've always mean that the business heads, or particularly even the CEO of the organization, when we talk about project sponsors. That's all from my side. Thank you so much. It was wonderful interacting with all of you this afternoon. Look forward to interacting more at our booth. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Amit Barua, for sharing your knowledge on how to empower senior leaders through strategic learning interventions. To do the honors, I request Mr. Karthik, Director of Talent Development at Omega Healthcare, to please join us on the dais.